Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And in this one, I wanted to go over my current power rankings for the ranged DPS when it comes to 3v3 Arena in patch 9.1. And as many of you know that have followed along with my videos, I made a prediction tier list as well to this patch, anticipating where I thought specializations would end up landing in terms of their competitive viability. So I will be showcasing that prediction at the end of the video to sort of cross-analyze the two and see how close I got in terms of my prediction versus reality and what has ultimately happened. So patch 9.1 is a very bursty meta still. Cooldowns are still very important. Sustained damage has been brought up on some specializations, and I would say for the specializations that got those buffs, that those ones are actually leading in terms of their meta defining ability, and we should go over the skill that I'm going to be using. So meta means that if you're on meta tier, pretty much any class in the game wants to play with you at some capacity. You basically are defining the way that the game is played, and you're most commonly seen. Solid means that you pair usually the best with anything that ends up being in a meta position, and you can play amongst yourselves within the solid tier. You're going to be having a really good time on these specializations. Limited means that you may have one option in terms of composition. It may not necessarily even be the best composition, but within that designated area, you do have potential. Below average means that you don't even really have a limited amount of options. You are just inferior in all regards. And play at your own risk is just the ultimate abyss. You don't want to be down in the play at your own risk category for this tier list. So starting things off, we've got the Affliction Warlock, and this is a specialization that focuses on sustained damage. That is not what this patch is about. That's not really what 3v3 Arena has been about for a long time, and thus Affliction Warlock has not been doing well. It is particularly about big burst damage. You can access that a bit with Death Bolt. Some of the new honor talents that have come in, I feel are benefiting Destruction more than Affliction specifically. I'm almost at the point where I'm starting to think Demonology might be better than Affliction. From what I've seen, to me, I would say that Affliction is somewhere below average and limited. You can play with a Shadow Priest and try to make that work, but you are going to have a really hard time. That is pretty much going to be your only option, is the Affliction Shadow Priest healer composition. And outside of that, pretty much every Shadow Priest and healer wants to play with somebody else. So your limited option is not that great. Outside of that, I don't really see anybody really wanting you in terms of desirability for Affliction. So do we put it on limited? Do we put it on below average? In my prediction, this below average tier was potential, could have potential. Now we know if it did or didn't, right? So I changed that to below average. It's a really tough one for me. I'm tempted to put it in the below average. Remember, this is 3v3 Arena. We're going to see it play a little bit more in the tournament. Walrix from Europe has been running it a lot on the Team Integrity Damp, and he's running with the Shadow Priest. So we'll leave it in limited for now, but do note that it's hovering somewhere more in between below average and limited in my mind at the moment. Now, Arcane Mage, this is a specialization that was in the potential tier to begin with, and now I think it's doing a lot better. I actually think it's not the best mage spec, but it's definitely the second best mage spec, and that's mostly because of how durable it is. It's much tankier than the other mage specializations because it has access to honor talents that the other ones don't. They give it more defense, and its ability to just immediately chunk out massive burst damage fits perfectly into the meta, and you've still got polymorph, so you're going to be able to spam out crowd control at will. And I have been seeing a lot more Arcane Mages doing better on the ladder, playing things like Windwalker Arcane Mage, Rogue Arcane Mage. Rogue will probably want to play with something else. Most of the specs that are playing with you would probably prefer that you were fire, but you can make it work. So to me, I think it's probably limited in terms of its options, because I really don't see it played too much outside of Windwalker, Rogue, and Shadow Priest. So, but at the same time, those are all really good specializations. So do we say that it's solid because it can work with those? We'll put it in the solid tier for now. We'll assess it when we come back. In terms of, does it really work with everything else that's going on right now in the game or not, and should we move it down to limited or not? I wouldn't say that Arcane is meta defining. I don't as many Arcanospheres as you've probably seen KOing people. I don't think that it's going to put it in the meta tier, so we'll leave it at solid for now. Definitely fits into the meta, and it's in a much better spot than it was before. Beast Mastery Hunter is really easy. Beastmaster Hunter is just doing an insane amount of overwhelming damage, has good immediate crowd control, got a lot of changes to its honor talents to provide it some more bolstering towards its weakness and losing its pets. Beastmaster is in a phenomenal position. You have, although at the same time I'm saying Beastmastery is meta defining, but really I'm only seeing it played with feral druids at the moment. So it's a bit odd, isn't it? I feel like we see this specialization so much. This is me just talking about it, right? It feels like it's meta defining because it's so popular, but it really is only playing a set number of comps. Maybe that's because the set number of comps are just so absolutely out of this world. Like feral druid support is just absolutely bonkers that it could play with other stuff, but you're just not going to because feral druid's a DPS and a healer and a tank, so you may as well pick that specialization up with the hunter. So I think it is fair. We leave it on meta. Having seen it play out now that it's a meta spec, you are going to see it quite frequently on the ladder, and it is interchangeable with specs, although it's most popular with the feral druid and priest healer variant at the moment. Now, balanced druid, I've seen a lot of cheesy Night Fae balanced druids getting big Convoke one-shots. I've seen Kyrian balanced druids pushing to the first page of the ladder. I've seen a lot of Necrolord druids switching over and starting to run kind of the dot build that was known for Boomkin. Boomkin survivability has gone down a lot. You're going to notice that you're much weaker into things like Rogue Mage than in the past because you're not getting access to extra damage reduction, and your frenzied regen healing was nerfed, which affected balance a lot more than feral because feral had access to instant regrowth. So to me, I think balanced druid is still solid because it has instant crowd control, instant burst, one-shot potential, and it is still reasonably durable. And if it's played well, it is more than reasonably durable. I think for me, balanced druid is a solid pick. I don't think it's absolutely meta defining at the moment where everybody's picking it and it's paired up with everything, but it has a good shot with a lot of variety. I've seen Windwalker Moonkins, Shadow Priest Moonkins. Those are usually the number one options. It's in an all right spot, I would say, overall, but definitely not the meta slots. Demonology Warlock, I think, has improved a lot. There's a ton of damage right now with the Fell Obelisk and the Tyrant combined together. I've been seeing it a lot more frequently. I think at the moment it's playing mostly with Shadow Priest and maybe a little bit of Mage that I've seen, but mostly Shadow Priest. It's pretty limited in terms of its compositions and its picks, but it's doing a lot better than it was before. I would say that it was probably here before or here. So being in the limited category means you're going to have a couple of options now. I think playing double spellcaster is going to be where you want to slot yourself in. So Elemental Shaman, Demonology, Shadow Priest Demonology, Mage Demonology, something along those lines is probably where you're going to want to put yourself at the moment. I would say that it's actually better than Affliction. So maybe we put Demo here. This means the best of the tier. And then if you're towards the right, you're at the bottom of the tier for limited options. Destruction Warlock. We're seeing it pop up in the tournaments. It still has a place in Mage Warlock. That's kind of where it's always had its place. It's still very limited outside of the double spellcasters. It seems like almost all the Warlocks are kind of pigeonholed into that at the moment, where they need to play with double range DPS. However, I have seen it play with Mage, and I've seen it played with Elemental, and a little bit of Shadow Priest. You're probably going to get frustrated playing this specialization because a lot of classes will just run you down and do things that you do in a cast in instant cast form. So you'll be like, well, why does my Chaos Spell only hit for this when his Templar's Verdict hits for that? This doesn't seem fair to me. So I would say that you're probably going to be frustrated with it. Not to say that it doesn't work. I think that Destruction is still probably your best pick. It is 100% your best pick for lock specializations. I would say that it's solid, but it comes towards the bottom end of the solid tier. It's probably the most flexible of the Warlock specs in terms of your options to play with melee DPS or ranged, and its viability and its power. So it's, I would say, in a solid position. Elemental Shaman. This is one where it's tough to say because I haven't seen enough of it in the tournament play yet to really be able to tell you, because a lot of teams that ran with Elemental Shamans are just not running with Elemental Shamans anymore. On the ladder, it's still got the Zip Zap one-shots, Elemental Equilibrium legendaries. It's still in a great position than before. Maybe since some of the armor nerfs, it might have a bit more of a troubling time with Assassination Rogues. It's particularly where it's been weak. So I wouldn't say that it's absolutely meta-defining at the moment, but you're going to have more flexibility as a ranged DPS to play with melee and ranged with this on the ladder in terms of your competitive viability. I think that it's a solid pick. It's probably the most solid of the solid picks. so put it right in at the top for Elemental Shaman. Fire Mage, this is an easy one now that we've seen everything that's come to fruition, and it's meta defining. For me, is it better or worse than BM? Maybe it's got more options. Fire was the number one spec where everybody was wondering, oh no, what's going to happen? It's getting nerfed. It's going to get removed from the game. And a lot of people were going, well, yeah, Fire Mage is out of here, man. Frost Mage is going to be in. It's definitely going to be a Frost meta now. But still, instant damage trumps all. The fact that Fire Mage has multiple schools of magic and doesn't need to cast during its burst damage means that it rises to the top, cream of the crop. And now having Ring of Fire as an honor talent provides the Fire Mage damage outside of its combustion, so that maybe that one limiting factor that it had previously, it now no longer has, because it has access to another burst ability called Ring of Fire. You're going to see this composition a lot: Rogue Fire Mage healer, or Warrior Fire Mage healer, or Windwalker Fire Mage healer. You can play with a set number of ranged DPS. I'm sure that Elemental Fire Mage is still great. I've seen Fire Mage Destruction, so you can already see like fire can pretty much pair up with anything, almost make anything viable. Demo, maybe, or Affliction. So because of that, I think that it does come in the meta-defining role, having access to Cauterize for an extra cheat death effect on this massive amounts of burst damage that's currently available, puts it in a great spot, even despite the fact that Kleptomania is now only available to Arcane. I don't think that this puts Arcane in the spot where it's just completely dominating the battlefield, and that's mostly because Arcane will likely have a problem that Fire doesn't, where it's just being run down and doesn't have its opportunity to get going the same way that Fire would, because it's going to be interrupted a lot more. So Fire is still meta defining. Now Frost Mage, this is a specialization again that I think a lot of us were thinking, wow, Frost Mage is going to be meta defining. This Ice Wall buffs to its Frostbolt damage. It's still just the case that sustained damage is not as important as cooldown damage, and the cooldowns from Frost Mage when you're left free casting with Ice Form, moderately threatening compared to some of the other cooldowns that are available in the game, especially if you left them unattended. Whereas if you leave the Frost Mage attended, they're not going to really be too much of a threat. The Ice Wall just kind of falls flat in Arena. Maybe it has more usability in Battlegrounds or something where you can lock a flag carrier in a specific position, but in Arena, it's just usually dropping an honor talent for it, I think, could be pretty stressful, and it's not absolutely game breaking. You didn't get anything like an Arcanosphere to absolutely KO somebody like Arcane, and you don't have the combustion of fire, and you don't have the Ring of Fire that Fire got for extra burst damage outside of your Ice Form window. It's still in a solid spot. I think that you can still utilize Frost, but it's definitely inferior to Fire. It's an inferior to Arcane. So maybe we'd put it in the limited category where, like Destruction Fire Mage or Destruction Frost Mage, you're going to have a decent time with that composition. But in any other position, most classes and comps are going to want to replace with a Fire, if not an Arcane Mage. But that double spellcaster is still where you're going to have your authority, so it'll be limited, not below average, or play at your own risk. Now, Marksmanship Hunter, main problem with Marksmanship is that BM and Survival have been getting a ton of attention. And I mean, Survival and BM were underperforming for a while, and this is in PvE and PvP. So they've been getting a lot of indirect buffs. And it's now got to the point where, having played with Marksmanship Hunters and seen Marksmanship Hunters comparatively, it's kind of just like, why aren't I BM or why aren't I Survival? They do more damage and we do the same thing. There's not really a reason for me to be Marksman other than I'm just sitting duck to get attacked at the moment. So for me, while you can make it work, if you really want to try hard to make it work, you're way better off being BM. You're way better off being Survival. So for me, I think it's probably below average. I'm tempted to really just play it at your own risk. I'm giving it maybe a little bit more credit. In the hands of a phenomenal player, you might be able to make this work where you would otherwise be a Survival or BM Hunter, but your partners will just be thinking in the back of their minds the whole time, why doesn't this guy just respec? This isn't that great. So definitely take that into consideration for Marksmanship. Now, Shadow, I think that Shadow Priest is a meta-defining specialization at the moment. It's pretty tough to call as to which of these three are currently number one versus the other. They kind of have different counters to each other, right? Mages hate jungle, but Shadow Priests don't really like the Rogue Mage setups. But the melee cleaves, Fire Mages would probably prefer over the Shadow Priest. So you've got this kind of trifecta of the meta has things that they like fighting and things that they don't like fighting. So it's tough to put them in the specific order in terms of their power. Maybe Destro is better than Arcane is the only thing I'm thinking here with my current list. But Shadow Priest works with everything in the game, right? You can play ranged, double ranged. You can play with almost every melee DPS in the game. Having spammable purge is a great toolkit. Having nice sustainable healing is awesome. Having basically instant cast mass dispel for any crowd control, completely game breaking for Shadow Priest at the moment. And you just do a truckload of damage. You have the option of going Necrolord or Venthyr at the moment. If you want more offense for Mind Games, or you just want more raw damage and defense from Necrolord, I think they're both viable competitively on the ladder. Going to be up to more so your playstyle choice, but Shadow is definitely meta-defining. Now, when it comes to my prediction, I had to pull up my old prediction here and drag it over here. So this was my prediction. Oh my god, I can't get it onto the screen. What is wrong with my monitor? I promise I'm not trolling. I promise it's actually not dragging onto this other monitor for some reason. Okay. We got it halfway onto this monitor. Okay. Okay, it's really big. I don't know why it's so big. Let's make it smaller. Let's see how close we were, all right? We'll pull this out of the way. Okay. So we got it right here. So we said BM was going to be meta-defining. We said Ellie was going to be meta-defining, right? So that's wrong. Ellie is still solid. I think I was hesitant about Fire Mage. I was hesitant about Fire Mage and I was hesitant about Shadow Priest. I put them on solid. So they were definitely meta-defining though. So slightly off on that prediction. I got 1 out of 3. Solid pick. I said Boomkin. I said Destro. And I didn't say Arcane. I said Frost would be solid. So incorrect about the Frost pick. Limited. I said Affliction. Here I've had potential. So this was Demonology and Arcane. So Demonology and Arcane had potential. Their potential was met somewhat, right? With Arcane in my mind coming up to solid. And then Demonology coming up to limited, potentially solid. I think it's fair to leave it at limited at the moment. And then Marksmanship Hunter was play at your own risk for this patch. And I still think it's relatively about in the same area. Did I totally miss the mark with my prediction here? I mean, I'll let you guys decide, right, in the chat. How off do you think I was? 1 for 3 here. What is the math here on this? 2 for 3 or something like that. I don't know. It's pretty close. This is a really tough thing to do. But again, that's why I wanted this as follow-up. We always do follow-up predictions, just kind of the fun, like, hey, what's based on the changes theoretically, what could be amazing? Again, I think Ice Wall and all these other features, Frost's sustained damage getting buffed. I thought sustained damage would matter more, so Ellie would be in a better spot. I thought there was potential here for some of those new auto talents, and there was. But in terms of the balance, in terms of here, Fire Mage and Shadow, I put them at the top, so they were the next ones in line. Pretty close, I would say. But you guys let me know in the comments down below. If you like this type of video, leave it with a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this content. Comment down below again with your thoughts on this prediction. Was I totally off base? And thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next video.